How we doing, ladies and gents? Welcome to another debrief with your boys. Couple nurses here, coming live from San Diego. We have officially started our travel nursing contract.
Same spot, same hospital, different patients. You know how it is.
Same amount of floating, to be honest. That has not changed.
Actually, we floated off the rip. At least when we first started the contract, we just got orientation on the unit and a few days before we got floated. But here, they knew who we are. Floated. First three nights, I floated. That's it. It's floated.
Yeah, so my first dates, it was interesting where I bypassed orientation. So in Peter's scenario, you just extended your contract, right?
Yeah.
I ended up coming back for a new contract is the way they called it. I went to talk to the manager, got the hookup there. I got the authority or authorization to skip orientation, but of course they told me you're good to go. That was not the case. I thank God I went to work half an hour early where I went to security, got my badge access, hopped on Epic. Of course, my password didn't work. I had to call them, troubleshoot it. So by the time 7 p.m. came, I was able to take my patients.
Yeah. And I lost my access because remember how I told me to come to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I came there Monday? I was able to badge into the doors, so I had access. So probably what happened is they took me off and put you on that probably first Wednesday that you started work.
Yeah.
Because I had badge access the first day, but I just didn't have to work, surprisingly, you know. So they probably just took me off for some reason. Maybe they made a mistake, and then they added you and then took me off because I had no access on the Thursday that I came in.
Yeah, and there was absolutely no stress about it. It's something you expect as a travel nurse or any single time you go into a shift. You know that things are not going to be smooth. You're going to be looking for things. Even in my shift, handful of times, you're looking for the vital cart. You're looking for some lab vials because things aren't stocked. You're looking around for catheters or mouth swabs because you have no idea where anything is. So always expect friction. Just part of the game when it comes to being a nurse, to be honest.
Yeah, 100%. And you're telling me a little bit about your patient you had, some stories. You want to bless us with your stories? Because you don't want to tell me too much. You
I was saving it for the thing. So I'll start with a lady that was there for like 180 days. And when we were there travel nursing back in beginning of the year, she was admitted around April, still was there in September time when I came. And just a very sad case because the family didn't want to let go. One daughter wanted, the other daughter didn't. Caused a lot of disputes where I had to be calling when the other one daughter leaves, another one come in. Very bad family dynamic. She was very, very sick. She had multiple myeloma. Throughout this hospital stay, she had complicated bleeds, a total of 36 units of blood. And she ended up getting tricked and pegged because of her almost coding, can't breathe on her own, still trying to keep her alive. Had a, developed a stage 4, unfortunately. All this stuff is going on. And then the doctor said, like, hey, this is futile care. We can't be doing this. There's no benefit for her. What are we really doing here? So the shift that I got on for her, the family, which was the daughter that had a hard time letting go, finally decided, let's do comfort care. So what happened is we got the order for morphine, and it was only IV push, 4 milligrams Q4 instead of the regular drip, with some Ativan and then the other medication to decrease secretions.
The patch?
It's a scopolamine patch, but this one was IV push, something with the letter G. Not glyphosate.
Glyphosate. Yeah.
Don't be eating that.
Yeah, watch out for your grains and your rices.
Yeah, and oatmeal nowadays, I've heard, especially Quaker Oats.
Do you know if they ever got ethics involved? Because we always hear, hey, these hospitals have ethics committees, but every time that I feel like that I've experienced an ethical dilemma case, you could say, there is an ethics committee and it gets thrown around, but I feel like nothing ever goes to the ethics committee. So did they ever do anything with the ethics committee for this patient that you know
They
of?
did have ethics involved. I just didn't read the chart fully to see how far it went.
Yeah.
But what was good is, hey, they finally decided to comfort. So she was vent dependent, went on a trach collar. Family went home, and they told me, hey, let me know when she goes. I told them, hey, it might be hours, might be days, might be weeks. We have no idea. She's been around for 180 days fighting. She could just fight for another month for all that we know.
Yeah.
And what happened is that shift, I was in other patient's room. I just heard the alarm go off. The nurse tells me, hey, your patient's gone, because I left the tele. And man, was that family still pissed about all this. So not only was there futile care involved from the family side. They were pissed as hell at me that I didn't let them know when her mother's going to pass.
Yeah, like
But I'm not a fortune teller.
Yeah, just take out your crystal ball and tell them when they're gonna pass away. That's the one thing is like people always want to know when their loved one's gonna pass away, and it's super hard to dictate. You have no idea. You have no idea. Some people really hold on to life, and it takes 12 hours, 8 hours, a couple of days. Sometimes you have to have them go to different floors so they can have more privacy. It's always a really tough call. So, I mean, I always tell families I'd rather have them stay. But of course, that's not always the situation unless I know they're going to last couple hours. Sometimes you could kind of, I want to say sometimes you could gauge it, but it's really hard. But when someone's like a DNR and they're on one pressor and then you take them off, you could kind of almost eyeball it. But
Right.
in your case, it was really hard. I had that patient many times before, and I felt like she was ready to go. Like she was ready to go months ago.
Yeah.
It's like you look at her and you're looking at a skeleton. There's nothing that you can do for a poor lady, and it's just she's wasting away. It's tough.
Yeah. And just like you said, sometimes you can predict it where you're looking at that breathing pattern where they're taking a breath every 5 to 6 seconds. It's very delayed, and it's like, okay, hey, impending doom. But in this case, it seemed like the heart just gave out, Brady down, asystole. We can't do anything about that.
Yeah, and if somebody puts you on a spot and really wants to know when a patient is going to pass, the best thing you could do is just say, hey, I'd rather you stay here overnight and just wait with your family member. That's always a good option to choose from instead of guessing or eyeballing it because you're not sure. So just always tell a family member, I'd rather have you stay overnight or throughout the day.
And it's hard because a lot of time our patients or family members ask us these very direct questions. How long is this usually going to be? What does the scenario look like? And it's a human experience. Everybody's so much different. I can tell you what happens after a stroke in the steps, but I can't tell you what is the recovery of your left and right leg. I don't know if your limb is going to fully recover and you can move. That's based on rehab and what has to happen, where the stroke is, and a neurologist knows more than that. So we get asked some difficult questions, man. And shout out to all the nurses that de-escalate the situation or know how to respond in the best manner where you're not instilling false hope and the family's still satisfied with the care that you're giving.
Right, and it's comfort care. So usually we have prescribed, like in your case, morphine. You're not sure how patients are going to react to the morphine. Yeah, they might have been fine with the morphine on the pressors, but now you DC the levo, and now the patient isn't as constricted, so morphine is going to help them pass away a little bit quicker. But you don't really know. Everyone reacts to it differently, so it's really hard to gauge. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, and I had another case that blew me away, completely different from everything, and it was a SI patient, suicidal. And what happened with their case, I think it's both beautiful and sad at the same time. So this relationship was very dependent. The wife was going on hospice and she had 2 weeks to live. It seems like they had no family, just a niece and nephew around, so they planned a joint suicide attempt where he had some neck pain. He was just stashing away his oxycodones. They ended up collecting like 50 plus. They all decided to take it one day and end their lives. Hospice nurse comes in, sees them both laying in bed with vomit, calls EMS, gave some Narcan, end up saving their lives. But it's just so sad because you're in your 80s and you are so dependent on your wife where you don't want to be without her. And it's just so sad with the situation where you have you're one-on-one, you're 50-150 hold, and you can't go see your loved one when she's passed away from whatever the complication is, cancer, I'm assuming, and she only has a week or two left. So just go let them be together. I don't know how all that clearance has to be, but just go let them have the rest of their time together. Lock up the medication in a safe, put a code in where the nephew and niece only knows, and just help them live the rest of their life peacefully. And yeah, that was an unfortunate case.
Yeah, I feel like if one of them passes away, the other one's going to get the what's called broken heart syndrome, and they're going to slowly deteriorate as well. We see that a handful of times where the husband passes away, and the husband was the wife's entire life, and now she has nothing to do, nothing to really care for. You could say almost like they lose a purpose in life, and it slowly starts. I don't want to say slowly, but they start to decline more quickly than they would normally, and that's probably what's going to happen in your case because if I remember correctly, the one of the significant others has cancer, right? So they were gonna pass away before the other one. That's why they were committing suicide, right?
Yeah, they both did it together so they could both rest peacefully.
Yeah. So one of these people in this couple is going to pass away shortly. Other one's unfortunately going to probably follow suit with the broken heart syndrome. Yeah, it's tough. It's
Part of life. How was your shifts? Anything exciting?
Man, I've been CIWA Central, man. I think we had like 6 or 7 CIWA patients. Every nurse had a CIWA. I had the luxury of having 2, so that was nice. One of them was busy. Other one wasn't that bad. My major CIWA, the one that was having these withdrawals, he drank over a gallon a day of vodka. Whatever he get is basically hands on. He's been doing that for 15 years.
He's been basically hydrating off vodka, man.
Yeah.
I barely drink a gallon of water a day.
Yeah, dude. And the thing is, he says that it makes him feel warm. So I happened to have the day after I finished listening to the Gabor Mate podcast with Joe Rogan, and they talked about childhood trauma. And they mentioned in the podcast where this guy was doing heroin, and he said that he loved the feeling of heroin because it made you feel warm and almost felt like your mom was hugging you. So I started picking this patient's brain, like how his childhood was, what did he struggle with growing up, and his dad was in and out of jail. I wasn't really there for him, so I could kind of, I guess, correlate that one feeling that he got when he drinks was probably his feelings being swallowed by the alcohol, and it made him feel warm, and it almost felt like love that he never got.
Yeah, he didn't know how to give it to himself internally, so that dopamine rush was always X amount of heroin or X amount of alcohol that gave him that same feeling.
Yeah.
And that's so unfortunate, but we do see so many trauma. Even like going back to this case with the SI, he was really confused. It was hard to pick his brain, but for the conversations that we had, it seems like his father did give him like some physical abuse where I try to like hold him down because he's trying to get out of bed. It's like, don't touch me. Only my father can do that, or only was allowed to do that.
Oh shit.
So then you start picking up on like, wow, maybe he did get physically abused, and he was always mentioning 100 hours of work, and I worked a lot of my life. So it's like, again, there's different escapes. It could be drugs, it could be being a workaholic where you have no time for yourself, and then you're still feeling negative. And yeah,
and his patient actually had a brother, and his brother wasn't an alcoholic, but his brother was obese. So it's crazy because one of my patient, he hid his feelings by drinking alcohol. The other one did it with food. So it's like a crazy concept where they both struggle with addiction. And he was telling me that his brother does struggle with addiction, but with junk food. He likes to eat a lot. He likes to feel full. That's the thing. So it's like crazy how they both went through the same trauma, and they both had addiction. One to food, one to alcohol. Mind blowing.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate, especially in healthcare. We always try to. We talked about this in the car about diet, like ADHD and like labeling people with disease processes, but really there's so much more behind the surface if you really get to know patients and what's happening, that they need healing.
Yeah. And since we're on CIWA, I could run you guys through the whole CIWA protocol. So when somebody comes to the hospital with alcohol withdrawal, we usually put them on something called a CIWA protocol. Usually it's Ativan, also called lorazepam. Sometimes we give them a Valium or phenobarb, depending on how bad their withdrawals are. And this guy was withdrawing really bad. And his problem was that he was not responding to Ativan at all. I tried PO, I tried IV. So I came on shift, and within the first 4 hours, I gave him 18 milligrams. And the nurse on days gave him a total of 12. And literally, I gave him 18 within the first 3.5 hours of my shift. And it did nothing to him. It didn't touch him. So then I got Valium. Then I gave him 10 milligrams of Valium, and that finally did something for him, because this guy was having tremors real bad. He was sweating real bad. He had a headache. He was nauseous. He didn't tell me he had a visual hallucination, but every time he dozed off, he was talking to himself, and like somebody was there. But when he was awake, he's fine. But when he was sleeping, he was talking in his sleep. So he was definitely hallucinating. He was definitely having a hard time. He just felt like garbage. So I tried to get the Ativan switched to the Valium. A doctor wouldn't do it because he wasn't very familiar with switching it. He was more familiar with Ativan to Valium. He didn't want to give it to me, so I had to keep paging him for PRN Valium. So I gave him a total of 18 milligrams of Ativan that shift, and a total of 30 milligrams of Valium. That's a lot.
You got juiced up.
So I got juiced up, yeah. And then finally I told day shift, like, hey, when they do the rounds, can we switch it from Ativan to Valium, because Ativan's not touching him. And the one thing that I'm always scared of with these like psych drugs, like Ativan or any kind of things, is sometimes you load them up and it doesn't do anything, and for some reason 4 to 6 hours later it all hits them at once, and then they're snowed and then you get intubated. So that's always my biggest fear with Ativan and drugs like that, because sometimes you load them up and you think it's not working, you're giving them 4 milligrams, 6 milligrams, 5 milligrams, and you're like, damn, this isn't working, and it's been 3 hours where you're giving them every hour medication and it doesn't work, and then you keep loading him up, and then 4 hours later, mid shift or towards the end, he's completely zonked and he's not breathing. And that's like the one thing that really scares me with the CIWA protocols, because some reason, even though these drugs have like a half-life, they have a time of onset, everyone's different. Same like we talked about patients passing away and getting morphine for comfort care. Everyone's different. You're not sure how they're gonna relax. Sometimes people get knocked out right away. Some people, you load them up and nothing happens. So it's kind of scary. And then so with CIWA, you usually assess them every 2 hours, and if they're withdrawing real bad, you could do it every hour. So I was basically doing CIWAs every hour for basically the majority of my shift. Like the first, I'm gonna say 8 to 9 hours of my shift, I was just giving meds and just helping this guy relax. And then the last 3 or 4 were pretty calm, because he was actually finally able to sleep. And he slept those last 4 hours of my shift, and he slept basically all day, because the guy didn't sleep like in 2 days.
Yeah.
It was rough, but it was cool. CIWAs are hit or miss. Sometimes you get CIWA, like my other patient was a CIWA, but he was fine. I gave him 3 milligrams of Ativan at 10 p.m., 2 night shifts in a row, just to help him sleep, and then he's been completely fine.
And then some patients, they need to go to the ICU to get some Precedex, and that's where we kind of snow them, watch them more closely. They just need to lay off and transition from that 48 to 72 hour period when the alcohol withdrawals are most prevalent. And then also just be careful for seizure precautions. If you have your CIWA patient, pad your rails. And I'm sure that's already going to be a standing order, because sometimes the withdrawals could be so bad, their threshold is decreased and they could go into a full-blown seizure.
Yeah, and I also recommend giving them a nicotine patch. Usually people that drink, they also usually smoke. So sometimes you could say they're withdrawing from 2 different substances. Slap on a nicotine patch, let them just deal with alcohol withdrawal, and then tell them to cut down on cigarettes later.
Yeah.
One thing at a time.
Were you also giving Lyrica?
No, I was using Librium.
Librium, that's what it's called.
Librium, yeah.
Lyrica is antidepressant.
Yeah.
Okay,
Librium.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the other name is for it, but Librium. Otherwise, it's like a big name.
Yeah, I don't know the whole mechanism of action, but I know it's part of the CIWA bundle to get patients started on the Valium or the
Ativan or phenobarb.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you can put them on like a lorazepam drip too, but I've only seen that happen one time, and that was when I was still a staff nurse, and I literally gave like 24 milligrams of Ativan in the first 4 hours of my shift, and then we had to put them on an Ativan drip, but only for a couple hours, because like we put them on an Ativan drip at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and then they did rounds at 7, and doctor freaked out because he's never seen an Ativan drip in his life. He DC'd it, so that was my experience with Ativan drip 4 hours.
What else is new other than working shifts? So we are
going to
TravCon actually tomorrow after this recording. So the next debrief will give you guys a little background of what our experience was. We're going to go have some fun there, network a little bit, check out the party, see what the TravCon nursing partying is all about. Looking forward to that.
It's our first time going. So many people have been there a handful of times. I'm genuinely curious on what happens. Nurses like to party. We'll see what they do when they're not partying,
Yeah, and then also as a podcast, it's going to be a great resource to go hang out with everybody in the market, see what they're up to, the new things that are happening in travel nursing, and we want to be more and more involved with as we're growing our brand out.
Yeah, and it's in Vegas, so maybe we could do like a Vegas and a TravCon vlog.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and we're vlogging the whole experience. So whenever that episode is out, we'll link it in the podcast so you guys could check it out.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you guys for your time. We'll see you on the next debriefing.
Peace.